In this three-part series, you're going to learn how to combine the popular front-end TypeScript framework Angular with an ASP.NET Core minimal web API. In the previous video, we created the front-end. This is the third and final video and will focus on publishing everything to Azure. You can download the source code created in this video for free via the link in the description. Links to the sources I used can also be found there. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Ruben, and on this channel you'll find educational content about .NET development. So if that interests you, consider subscribing. Now let's get started with the tutorial. So I'll keep everything we'll use in this tutorial free. Microsoft Azure has generous free tiers which we can make use of to learn how to use it. So what we're going to do is publish our ASP.NET Minimal API to an Azure App Service resource, and we'll publish the Angular frontend to an Azure Static Web App resource. To publish, the server will use the publish feature in Visual Studio, and to publish the Angular client, we'll create a GitHub repo and then we set up GitHub Actions with a simple continuous deployment pipeline. So when a new commit comes in with changes in the Angular code, it will automatically get published to the Azure Static Web App. So with that, we automate the release of code to the production environment, which is Azure. Alright, so let's dive in. What you're going to need is a free Azure account and a free GitHub account. And then I also believe a free Microsoft account, but you probably already have that. So if you don't have those yet, go ahead and create them. It's really simple. Alright, I want to start with the server. So let's go ahead and open up Visual Studio and the solution for this tutorial. Alright, so first of all, I want to specify that we want to send this SQLite database up to Azure when we publish. And we can do that via the properties here. So go ahead and navigate to server data appdb.db, and then you can right click that and select properties. Then you get this little screen, and right above my head you see the copy to output directory, and that needs to be on copy always or copy if newer for the first time you publish. And then when you publish it once, you set it back to do not copy, else your production database will get overwritten by your development database, and that's not good. So set that to copy always. Then we can right click server and select publish. Then I'll go for Azure and select next. And I'm gonna go for an Azure App Service Windows. So it runs on Windows. You can go for Linux if you want. Then I'll hit next. Right, and here is where we actually create the app service. And we can do that with this little green button, little green plus. So select that. All right, and the name is up to you. I'll go for Angular ASP.NET Server, and you can't use the same as mine as it needs to be globally unique, I believe. For the subscription, I'll keep the default pay as you go. For the resource group, I'm going to select my tutorials. I recommend you create a new one for this tutorial. You can do that with this new button. And you can consider the hosting plan as the computer this app service lives on. I have one for my tutorials. In the past, I created one for each tutorial and each app service, but you can actually have multiple app services on one app service plan. All right. So you can create a new one if you like with this new button, and then just give it a name, the location closest to you. And if you want it free, make sure you select free in the size here. So there you go. I'll cancel that. All right, and then just select create. So Azure is now creating our app service, and if you created a new app service plan called hosting plan here, it also creates that. All right, so when it's done, we come back in this main form, and I'll just click the app service we just created, and then select next. Then for API management, we won't be using that, as that's meant for bigger apps. So you can skip this step and then select next. All right, and then for the deployment, so we will use CI/CD for the Angular frontend, but not for this ASP.NET backend, because there's some issues with SQLite and GitHub CI/CD, which I have yet to fix. So for now, I'll just use the pub XML option, and then you only need to hit a publish button, so it's still, pretty simple, but not fully automated. So just select the publish option and then select finish. And it's done in a few seconds. So I'll close this. All right, and to actually publish it, all we need to do is hit this publish button, and you can open this tab by going to server publish. So now we are ready to publish. So I'll just select publish here. And now Visual Studio goes to work and publishes our web API to Azure. So I'll just cut ahead to when it's done. All right, so it took a few minutes for me. So when it's done, a browser window should open up with your Swagger UI. And let's just get all the posts to see if everything still works. All right, so that works. So the SQLite database is also up there. All right, so you now have an ASP.NET minimal web API running in the Microsoft Azure cloud. If we look at the address bar here at the top of the browser, we see that it isn't localhost anymore. So the address is now your Azure app service name .azure websites and .net, and then just /index.html, which refers to the Swagger API documentation page. All right, so that's the address the Angular frontend needs to call, to get its data. This is the production API URL. So there's an easy way to copy it. I'll just close my browser and back in Visual Studio, in this Publish tab, we see this site and it has a little copy button. So I'll click that. So now it's on my clipboard. All right, and let's quickly set the database back to do not copy. So in data, appdb.db, in the properties, set it back to do not copy. And just save all here. All right, let's now work on publishing the Angular frontend. So go ahead and open VS Code and the Angular project for this tutorial. All right, so let's update the constants. So in src app constants API endpoints.ts, we can now fill in the server base URL production. So I'll get rid of the example here, delete that, and paste the API on my clipboard. Save that. We also need to make another change here, else you'll get an error when you actually publish it to Azure. And the problem is this isDev mode function from Angular, and when we publish it to Azure Static Web Apps, the problem is that the isDev mode function gets called before the enable prod mode function, and that is not allowed. I don't know why this happens, but the fix or workaround is to remove the dependency on isDev mode. Alright, so what we need to do is get rid of this import, but I'll just change the name. And we need to import environment from, and then dot dot slash dot dot slash. So we're kind of back in the SRC folder, so 2 folders up. And then we need to go to the environments folder, and in there we have an environment.ts file, so we need to import that. And then below on line 43, instead of using isDev mode, we will use environment.production. And if that is true, we need to return the production endpoints. So we need to swap these two in the ternary operator, right? So I'll just do that. So if environment.production is true, return the production endpoints, else return the development endpoints. Alright, so that's everything we need to do in VS Code. So I'll close that. And now we need a Git repo hosted on GitHub, and Microsoft makes that easy to do in Visual Studio. So back in Visual Studio, you can go to Git changes. And if you don't see that, you can go to View Git changes. And I already have a Git repository, but I'll just open a solution where I don't have a Git repository yet. Alright, so this solution doesn't have a Git repository yet. So then you see this Create Git Repository button. So go ahead and click that. So the local path is the solution folder, which is good. You can keep that. And that means both the Angular client and the ASP.NET server are added to source control. Keep the gitignore template as default, and I'll keep the license as none. It's up to you. I'll leave the README unchecked. And here you need to log in to your GitHub account. And then for the repository name, give it a descriptive name, usually the same as the solution. And you can decide whether it needs to be private or not, and a description. And when everything looks good, you can select create and push. Alright, so I'll just cancel that because I've already done it. And we can move on to the Azure portal. So in your web browser, go ahead and go to portal.azure.com and sign into your Azure account, and then select create a resource. And then I'm gonna search for static web. And then we get this static web app as the first result. Select that. And then select create here. Alright, for the subscription, I'll keep pay as you go. And I recommend selecting the same resource group as for your server. So tutorials for me. Then the name, I'll do the same name as the server, but then change it to client. So that's gonna be Angular ASP.NET client. I'll keep the plant type as free. For the region, select the same one as for your server. Then for the deployment source, select GitHub and sign in to the correct GitHub account. Then for the organization, just create one. If you don't have one here, it's just give the thing a name, right? I've just used my own name. Then for the repository, select the one you've just created. For me, that's gonna be Angular ASP.NET Tutorial, and select the only branch, which by default from Visual Studio is called master. And then we can scroll down again, and for the build presets, select Angular. So for the app location, you need to fill in the folder name of your Angular project, and you can see that in GitHub. So if you go to the repository on GitHub, you see you have your root and then the client folder and the server folder and some other files. So the location of the Angular client is going to be /client, right? And we can leave the API location empty, as that is for Azure functions and that stuff. For the output location, you need to type dist /, right? And that's the most important part. And then just a folder name. So I'll go for dist /client. It's very important that you have this dist, else you'll get errors. So that's everything you need to fill in. Then we'll go ahead and click next, go to the tags, and we won't add any tags. Then we'll click next, review and create. And it looks good. Then just select create. Alright, so now Azure is going to work for us, and after waiting took a few seconds, you should see your deployment is complete page. And then select go to resource. So here you can manage your static web app. On the right side of the essentials, we see the URL. So this is the production URL. If we click that, we should see our Angular app, but the code gets here via GitHub Actions. So go to GitHub, go to the repository for this tutorial, go to Actions, and there we go. So we see an action is running, and you can click it to open it and see what it's doing. So now it's doing the build and deploy job, and you can click that to view what's happening in real time. The way our Angular app gets up to Azure is via GitHub Actions, and GitHub Actions is the thing that is responsible for listening to code updates of our repository, and if a new commit comes in, it publishes it to the Azure Static Web App. So you might be wondering, why is this action running? I didn't commit anything. Well, when you create an Azure Static Web App with GitHub as the source, Microsoft automatically does a commit for us. If we can see in the history, it says CI add Azure Static Web Apps workflow file, and we can see that it's done now. So the action completed. So if I go back to the production URL and refresh, we see that our Angular app is running in Azure. Yay! So if I open the action again, we can see that it's coming from a YAML file. So .yml is YAML, yet another markup language. If we click this, it opens up the file. I'm not gonna get into YAML syntax in this video, but it just has an auto-generated name that we also have for the production URL. So this is called a workflow file. We see that same build and deploy job. We clicked to kind of look into it. And on line 3 we see that this action listens to changes in the master branch on push, right? And we also see that on line 14 that the build and deploy job should run if a GitHub event name happens with the name of push, or a GitHub event name with the name of pull request, and the GitHub event action is not closed happens. So then this will run. And we also see the app location, API location, and output location we filled in the Azure portal. All right, now you might be wondering, okay, the Angular app is running. Why is the table empty? So if we go to the console, we see that the HTTP request from our Angular app has been blocked due to the CORS policy. So we need to add this URL to the server as a trusted source. I recommend getting the URL from the Azure portal. On the resource page we see the URL and we can just click this copy button. Right, and to update the server, I'll go back to Visual Studio and the solution for this tutorial. And then I'll open program.cs. So here we have the course origins, and I've already kind of added an example one for an Azure Static Web App. So just select that and paste. So that's now the correct Angular client URL. All right, now let's publish our server again. So you can just right click publish and then hit publish again. So if it's done, the Swagger UI opens up in the browser. It still works. So now if I refresh the Angular client, we see that it can talk to the server. All right, so all the CRUD operations work. Feel free to try them out. So create works, update works, and deletion also works. So there we go. We are almost done. There's one last little thing I want to do, and that is to edit the YAML GitHub Actions file and just improve it a little. So in Visual Studio, I'm gonna go to Git changes, and let's first get that automatic commit Microsoft did. So we can fetch and pull. All right, and then we can right click the solution and open it in File Explorer. All right, and now the solution folder has a .github folder. So I'll double click that and open workflows. And here we see the workflow YAML file. So first of all, I want to change the name to something more descriptive. So I'll just rename it F2 and go for Angular Client Azure Static Web Apps CI/CD. And let's open it. So I like to edit the YAML in VS Code, so that's what I'll use. So first of all, I'll change the name here on line 1 to Angular Client Azure Static Web Apps CI/CD. So what I want to do is only have this action run when the code is changed in the Angular app, and don't do anything if code is changed in the ASP.NET server. So I'll click on the end of this -master on line 6 and then enter and shift tab to go one indent back, and make sure you do this, else YAML syntax is considered invalid. And then we can add some file paths and specify folder changes this action should listen to. So I'll add paths, colon, and then enter that, and tab to indent, and then dash to specify a path, and single quotes, and then I'll fill in client /**, right? So everything under the client folder should trigger a GitHub action run. And then I'll add another entry, so dash, and then single quotes, and then specify .github/workflows/**. So if this YAML file is changed, also run the action. So let's commit this to GitHub, and then we are done with the tutorial. Alright, so to do the push to GitHub, I'll go back to Windows Explorer, click in the address bar, and just type WT and enter to open Windows Terminal. Alright, so to add all the changes, I'll do git add dot, and let's do a commit. So I'll do git commit -m, and for the message I'll fill in updated the YAML workflow file, enter that, and then I want to push that up to GitHub, so I'll do git push. Alright, there we go, and we can control click this link to open the GitHub repository and go to the actions tab, and we see the action for our commit is running and the name is updated, so it's now called Angular Client Azure Static Web Apps CI/CD, and you can click that, and for the rest we didn't change anything. So you can just take a look at what it's doing if you so please. So there you go, you now have an Angular app with a supporting ASP.NET Minimal API running in the Microsoft Azure cloud for free. It's amazing what's possible these days with just a computer, an internet connection, and a desire to learn. So thanks for watching. I hope this video was useful to you. If so, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. You can download source code and other resources for free from the description below. Lastly, I hope you'll join our developer Discord community. There you can chat with other devs and get help if you're stuck on something. Check the first comment on this video for an invite link. That's all from me. Good luck on your developer journey.